Voicemail came in at 6:47 in the morning on the Saturday of the May long weekend, while I was still in bed with my coffee going cold on the nightstand. It was my brother. His voice had that particular flatness he uses when he's already decided something and is just informing you after the fact. Hey, so Mom and I talked it over and we're doing the Cottage opening weekend as a family thing this year, just us and the kids. It's getting crowded and we want it to feel relaxed. You know how it is. Hope you understand. I played her twice. Then I set my phone face down on the blanket and stared at the ceiling for a long time. The May-long weekend at Connolly Lake had been the same every single year for as long as I could remember. My grandmother started it. We opened the cottage, scraped the winter grime off the dock, replaced the boards that the ice heaved, and ate my grandmother's tortilla from frozen because she always made extra in February and packed it specifically for that weekend. After she died, I kept making the tortilla. I was the one who hired the property management company to do the winterization each fall. I was the one who renewed the insurance. I was the one who paid the property tax installments on time because my brother kept forgetting, and we'd already gotten 2 late notices. And now I was being told the cottage, the one I co-owned, the one I maintained, the one my grandmother left to both of us, was suddenly a family-only space. His family, not mine. I don't know why, Mom embarrassed. I don't know text. I sat there for a minute, maybe 2, and then I got up, made fresh coffee, and opened my laptop. My name is Josie. I'm 31 years old. I'm a licensed insolvency trustee, which means I spend my days helping people untangle the financial wreckage that happens when someone in their life, a business partner, a spouse, a parent, decided that someone else's money was actually their money. I have seen every variation of financial manipulation that exists. I have filed court documents on behalf of people who lost everything to people they loved and trusted. I had been watching my own version of it happen for 6 years without doing a single thing about it. I opened a spreadsheet I'd been maintaining quietly, privately, since the year my grandmother died. I had named it simply Connolly. The numbers were not abstract. They were dates, amounts, purpose. There was the $18,000 I transferred to my brother the winter after the estate settled, because he said the roof needed emergency repairs and the contractor wouldn't wait. I paid it because I wasn't living close by and I trusted him. 6 months later, I drove up to find the same cracked shingles. The roof had not been touched. When I asked, he said the contractor had done preliminary work. I let it go. There was the $6,200 I covered the following spring when the dock needed full replacement after an ice storm. That one was real. I have the invoice. I paid it alone because my brother said he was between contracts and would pay me back when things settled. Things never settled. There was the $3,400 for the new water pump 2 years ago, also mine, because by then I had stopped asking and just handled it. There was the $1,800 in property tax arrears I cleared after my brother let the second installment lapse, and we got a notice from the municipality. There was the $950 for the new propane line after the inspector flagged the old one. The spreadsheet total at the bottom was $31,240. Not including 6 years of my own labor. Not including the weekend I spent alone repainting the boathouse. Not including the drive I made every single October. 8 hours round trip to do the seasonal walkthrough with the property manager because my brother never once showed up. I had built this place into something worth having, and now I was being told I wasn't welcome for the long weekend. I did not feel sad. I felt the specific clarity that comes when you finally see a pattern you had been refusing to name. I closed the spreadsheet. I opened a different browser tab. I searched for a real estate lawyer in the Muskoka area, one who specialized in co-ownership disputes. I found 3. I sent inquiry emails to all of them before I finished my second coffee. That was a Saturday. By Monday afternoon, I had a consultation booked with a lawyer named Dre, who had 17 years of experience in cottage country property disputes and a very calm, precise way of explaining exactly what my options were. Co-ownership disputes in Ontario are governed by the Partition Act, she told me. You have the right to either a physical partition of the property, which rarely works for a cottage, or a court-ordered sale. But before we go that route, let's talk about what you actually want the outcome to be. What I wanted was straightforward. I wanted my brother to either buy out my half at fair market value, or I would initiate a forced sale and we would split the proceeds. I was done maintaining a property I was being excluded from. I was done paying for something that had been quietly converted into his asset using my money. Dre told me to get an appraisal. I hired an accredited appraiser the following week. The cottage and lot came back at $680,000. My half was worth $340,000. I sent my brother a formal letter through Dre's office. It was 2 pages, clean and professional. It outlined the co-ownership, the maintenance contributions I had documented, and the 2 options: buy out within 60 days at the appraised value, or we list the property jointly and divide the proceeds after expenses. It included a copy of the appraisal. It included a summary of the Connolly spreadsheet. It gave him 30 days to respond in writing. He called me 20 minutes after the letter arrived. I don't pick up. I let it go to voicemail. His message was not calm. His voice had shifted from flat to something that sounded like fury with a thin coating of disbelief. The way people sound when they have been doing something wrong for so long they have genuinely forgotten it is wrong. He said I was blindsiding the family. He said the cottage was supposed to stay in the family. He said I was acting like a stranger instead of a sister. He used the word vindictive twice. He did not say anything about the $31,240. I listened to the message once and then saved it to a folder I created on my phone called Documentation. What happened next took about 2 weeks to fully materialize, but looking back, the shape of it was obvious from the first day. My brother had no intention of buying me out. He did not have $340,000 in accessible funds. He had a good income, but he also had a boat, 2 trucks, 3 kids in hockey, and the lifestyle of someone who had been borrowing against an informal bank, me, for half a decade. So he did what people do when they cannot buy something they want to keep. He tried to make me disappear from the paperwork instead. I found out because I have a professional habit of checking things. I was reviewing the online land registry one afternoon, not for any specific reason, just because I had set a notification on the property. There was a filing. A declaration of survivorship, submitted 11 days after my brother received Dre's letter. I sat very still at my desk and read it 3 times. A declaration of survivorship is a legitimate document. It is used to transfer property when one co-owner dies and the survivor becomes the sole owner. It requires a death certificate. It requires the surviving owner to file through their lawyer with the land registry office. My brother had filed one, with my name on it, with a death certificate that was not real. I called Dre before I stood up from my chair. "Don't touch anything," she said. "Don't call him. Don't text him. I need you to send me a screenshot of that filing right now, and then I'm going to make some calls." What followed was the kind of quiet procedural devastation that I had spent my entire career watching unfold for other people. Dre contacted the land registry office. The filing was flagged immediately because the death certificate number didn't correspond to any registered record in Ontario's Vital Statistics database. The registry froze the title. The Law Society was notified. The RCMP fraud unit opened a file. My brother had found, somewhere, a template for a death certificate. He had filled in my name. He had attached it to a legal document and filed it with a government office in an attempt to become the sole owner of a $680,000 property. He had done this because he could not afford to buy me out and could not imagine losing. The morning the investigator called to confirm the file was active, I was standing in my kitchen in Ottawa looking out at the street. It was raining, one of those gray June mornings where the light comes in sideways and everything looks slightly underwater. I felt something settle in my chest that I had not felt in a long time. Not relief exactly, more like accuracy. Like the world had finally caught up to the shape of what had been happening. I called my mother that afternoon, not to warn her, not to ask for her support. I called because she deserved to hear it from me directly before she heard it from anyone else. And because after 6 years of watching her excuse and minimize and redirect, I wanted to know what she would say when there was nothing left to excuse. She was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then she said, "You have to understand how much pressure he's been under." I said, "Mom, he filed a fraudulent death certificate with my name on it." She said, "I'm sure there's an explanation." I said, "There isn't." I told her I loved her and I hung up. Then I went into my contacts and changed her notification settings to manual. Not blocked, just no longer automatic. I was not going to disappear her from my life the way I had been disappeared from that cottage. But I was also not going to keep absorbing her management of him as though it were a weather event I had no choice about. The legal process took 4 months in total. My brother retained a lawyer, which struck me as optimistic because there was no version of this that ended well for him. The land registry fraud charge alone carried potential criminal code consequences. His lawyer eventually came back to Dre with a proposal. My brother would consent to the forced sale, waive any claim to the maintenance reimbursements as a set-off, and I would not pursue the fraud charges beyond the regulatory complaint already filed with the Law Society. I took 48 hours to think about it. The honest answer is that I did not want to watch my brother go to criminal court, not because I felt sorry for him. Because it would consume years of my life, draw my mother deeper into something she had already decided not to see, and the cottage would be tied up the entire time. What I wanted was the property sold and the chapter closed. I agreed to the deal on one condition: my documented maintenance contributions. The $31,240 would be deducted from his half of the proceeds before distribution. His lawyer tried to push back. Dre said the number was conservative and fully documented and they were welcome to go to discovery and explain the fraudulent filing to a judge. They stopped pushing back. The cottage listed in late September. It sold in 11 days for $665,000, which was close enough to the appraisal to feel like the math had always been clear. After fees and the maintenance reimbursement, my share came to $316,000 and change. I did not attend the closing. I did not need to be in the room. Dre handled it, the funds were transferred, and that was that. The week after closing, I drove up to Connelly Lake one more time. Not for any legal reason. I just needed to see it. The new owners hadn't moved in yet. The dock was empty. The water was that specific flat gray blue it turns in October when the summer people have all left and the lake goes back to belonging to itself. I stood at the end of the dock for a while, long enough that my feet got cold through my boots. I thought about my grandmother. I thought about the tourtières she made in February and how she always put extra pepper in it, more than the recipe called for, because she said recipes were just suggestions from people who hadn't been cooking long enough. I thought about how she used to sit in the Muskoka chair closest to the water and drink her tea and not talk. And how that silence never felt empty, it just felt like she was paying attention. I think she would have been furious, and I think she also would have told me I did the right thing. I walked back to my car. I drove out the gravel lane for the last time. At the road I paused, looked in the rearview mirror at the tree line, and then I turned and kept driving. My phone buzzed somewhere around Bracebridge. A text from my brother. It just said, "I hope you're happy." I pulled over, not because I needed to respond, just to sit with it for a second. The honest answer was yes, not the kind of happy that comes from winning or from watching someone lose. The quieter kind. The kind that comes from finally, after a very long time, not carrying something that was never yours to carry. I put the phone in my bag without responding. I emerged back onto the highway. The sky ahead had cleared and the light was long and gold the way it gets in Ontario in October, when the maples are almost embarrassingly beautiful and the whole province looks briefly like it's showing off. I drove home. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes not from being wronged once, but from being wronged slowly, incrementally, in ways small enough that you keep finding reasons to absorb them. That was my life with the cottage for 6 years. Not a dramatic robbery. A quiet erosion, payment by payment, excuse by excuse, until one morning I woke up and realized I had been funding someone else's inheritance with my own hands. What my brother did, filing that document, putting my name on a fake death certificate, that wasn't a moment of panic. That was a choice made by someone who had never once been asked to account for himself. And the reason he had never been asked is because the people around him, including me for a very long time, kept making his problems disappear before the consequences could land. I think about that a lot, not with bitterness, but with the kind of honesty that only comes after you've stopped protecting yourself from it. I enabled it. Every time I transferred money without a written agreement, every time I let a "I'll pay you back" slide into silence, every time I did the October walkthrough alone, rather than make it awkward, I was teaching him that there were no limits, that I was a resource, not a person with rights. The thing I had to reckon with was that doing the right thing requires more than good intentions. It requires clarity about what is actually happening and the willingness to name it even when naming it is uncomfortable. I had the spreadsheet for years. I had the numbers, the dates, the amounts. I just hadn't let myself look at what they added up to. That's not innocence. That's a choice to stay comfortable at the cost of your own interests. Intelligence without the courage to act on what you know is just a very elaborate way of standing still. What changed things wasn't anger. Anger had been there for a long time and it hadn't moved me any way useful. What changed things was deciding that I was going to treat my own situation with the same rigor I applied to every file that came across my desk at work. I was going to look at the actual numbers, consult the actual law, and act on what I found. That's it. No drama, no ultimatums designed to be walked back, just documentation and follow-through. My grandmother used to say that you teach people how to treat you. I heard that phrase 100 times growing up, and I always thought it was about being kind, about modeling respect so others would mirror it. I understand now that she meant something harder than that. You teach people what you will accept, and if you keep accepting what is not acceptable, you are not being kind. You are just making it easier for them to keep going. Dre told me near the end of the process that she had handled dozens of co-ownership disputes, and the ones that went furthest were almost always ones where one party had simply never been held to anything before. That landed differently than she probably intended it to, because the person who had never held my brother to anything more than anyone else was me. I don't carry guilt about that anymore, but I carry the lesson. Integrity isn't just about how you treat other people. It's about whether you are honest with yourself about what is happening, whether you have the discipline to act on that honesty even when it is costly and complicated and will make someone you love very angry, and whether you keep going when the process is slow and the outcome is uncertain. The cottage sold. The chapter closed. And I drove home on a clear October afternoon feeling, for the first time in years, like the math of my own life was finally balanced.